Royal Queen Seeds Interviews.
Welcome to another episode of the Royal Queen Seeds Interviews. Today with us is Mitchell Gorgichuk. Mitchell is the founder of Visionary Hydroponics, which he created through the passion of growing indoors and to offer products that allow growers to spend more time with their plants. Mitchell recognized an opportunity to provide growers with superior products and simplify their hydroponics operation. Hello, Mitch. Thank you for joining us today on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking.
Perfect. Right, so today is all about hydroponics, and our listeners are very, very interested in this topic. I mean, at Royal Queen Seeds, growing is one of the main things that we do. So we would like to ask you a little bit about how to start with this method. And the first question that I'd like to ask you is how you started and why you decided to go down the hydroponics way.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. First, thank you for having me. It's I love talking about growing. I'm very passionate about growing and hydroponics. And yeah, I guess how I started growing was here in Canada a couple years before legalization was announced. When I found out that it was going to be legal to grow cannabis in Canada, I immediately ordered books. I ordered the Grow Bible. That was kind of the standard and still is in many situations. And I read it, and I came on with where I live, what works for me, growing in a basement with 4 plants. I needed it to be clean. I needed it to be discreet. I needed it to be certain things to check boxes for me. I live in Canada. I didn't want to have soil in the house year round all winter. So there was a lot of things that it narrowed down for me. And so that's how I decided on it. And then once I decided on hydroponics and deep water culture, that's when I started growing tomatoes, vegetables, cucumbers, leafy greens, everything I could in preparation for legalization.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you tell us a little bit the story behind hydroponics? So everyone knows about soil cultures, but maybe a little bit less about hydroponics. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of it?
Yes. So hydroponics, the history as far as how far it goes back, I'm not sure. But hydroponics is relatively new from what I understand from deep water culture, from reading some books that maybe, in the last 20, 30 years, they came upon these buckets where they could simply, I guess, just to outline hydroponics, deep water culture for anyone who's not specifically knows about it, is a 5-gallon bucket which you fill with solution and an air stone, and then your roots are just suspended in it. And they came upon this grow style, I don't know if it was only maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, something like that. And it allowed the growers to, again, grow in, it used to be a little more important than it is in some places around the world to be discreet and not be carrying bags of soil and stuff in and out of a house. So hydroponics caught on for that, and also the ability to leave, for days at a time. If you do hydroponics right, you really have freedom to be gone for 2, 3, 4 days at a time, which is really unheard of for a lot of people in the way they grow. So that's the hydroponics is typically, deep water culture is really what I talk about specifically, but hydroponics applies to flood tables where you just flood your roots, right? And your roots absorb nutrients and then they go dry, and then they flood, the nutrients absorb, and then they go dry. And it's just simply plant roots exposed or not, depending on the situation, maybe floating. But with all these, there's different types of hydroponics. The flood tables, there's aeroponics where you spray you mist your roots. That's another style, hydroponics. Growing in cocoa is also considered hydroponics. And whenever you're using really an inert medium, and your roots rely only on what you kind of give them, right? And the medium's there for either holding the plant or, as in the case of cocoa, helping to maintain an area for microbes and a medium to control the wet-dry cycle, right? Yeah. So of all these hydroponic methods, deep water culture stood out for me. And the reason it did is because it was the lifestyle that it allowed me. I am not a stay-at-home dad anymore, but I was for 7 years with 3 children. And this is what it came down to when I was choosing deep water culture, is that I couldn't be tied to my garden and my grow every day. Yeah. Every minute, where it had to happen. And deep water culture allowed me to do that, where I can just fill it. You have your nutrient solution in there, and then you don't water. You don't have to water your plant. You don't underwater your plant. You just have a volume of solution that your roots are submerged in, and you just keep them in range. And so that really, really worked for me for my lifestyle. And
Yeah, no, I struggle with underwater my plants because I tend to forget about them, which is not very good. And the few clones that I keep in water, because they're just easier, I snip them and then I just put them there. They don't seem to have any problems. They're just there. And the one in soil, they're always like, I need more attention. So yeah, I think that's really appealing for anyone who wants to start and kind of have a less of a problem in their to-do list every day. So thank you so much for that. And another thing that get asked quite often is it true that plants grown with hydroponics seems to grow much, much faster than the ones in soil?
Absolutely. This is why you hit 2 really key things there. Is in hydroponics, they have everything they need. So you are there to maintain parameters, to control the environment. And there's really only 3 things that you're after. You're controlling the strength of your nutrients, your parts per million, you're controlling your pH, and you're controlling your temperature. Yeah. And those are the 3 things. As long as those are in range, just like your upper environment of your plant, as long as that lower environment is in range, then it has everything it needs. It takes the grower out of it. Yeah. So that's why they grow so much faster. People report anywhere from 30 to 40% faster in deep water culture because they're not ever waiting to be watered. They're always watered. They're never waiting for anything. As long as they are in range, they're at their maximum ability to do what that genetic can do. And this goes a little bit into advanced techniques, is that once you're in deep water culture and your plants are in that state of always being energized and always being uptaken, always having availability. This is the thing. When you're talking about a dry medium and you have to push X amount of nutrients through that medium to feed your plant through a grow cycle, that doesn't exist in deep water culture. It's always available. Yeah. It's not available when it's dry and only available when it's wet. It's just always available. So your veg plants, you can vegetate your plants 30% faster. Absolutely. You can grow seeds. You can go from seed to a big plant, a fairly large plant in 30 days. Deep water culture is just really powerful and really enjoyable, I think, for people for the reasons like you said. No overwatering, no underwatering.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you were talking about different mediums. So you said just water, you said cocoa, we can say maybe clay, pebbles, we have loads of different mediums. How important is the medium that we use? And can you tell us a little bit of maybe the ones that you prefer are not deep water culture, just hydroponics?
Yes. So the different mediums you're looking at, soil, right? That's the bulk of that's the bulk of growers. Then you have cocoa. That's an inert medium that would be considered hydroponics. The most common medium in hydroponics deep water culture is hydroton. Those are expanded clay pellets, but you can use anything you like. When you're talking about the way Hydroton is used, it's really used to support the plant. So you could use gravel, you could use sand, you could use nothing. You really don't need medium unless you're using medium to accomplish something. And this is where when we get into rock wool. Rock wool is an interesting medium. Again, it's not needed, but some medium allows you to introduce certain things into your plant, like mycorrhizae. If you don't have medium, then we're going to be looking at different products. But I think we can kind of do everything we need to anyway. But so I use rock wool, and for anyone who's not familiar with rock wool, it's a cool product because it's essentially like a rock blown into wool. Yeah. Rock wool, right? And it's expanded rock, and it's inert, and it holds a lot of moisture until you compact it. If you compact it, it's ruined. But when you leave it in its block, how it comes, it holds a ton of moisture, and you can grow completely in rock wool. You can start seeds in rock wool, and it is really nice in the way that you can water it, and it holds enough fluid for you only have to add fluid once a day, and then it has a nice environment to get seeds going and get a base of a plant going, and then you can transition that to whether you're going to deep water culture or cocoa or there's lots of different options.
No, absolutely. And so you were talking about the environment underneath the water and above the water. Can you tell us a little bit how can we prevent pests from invading our growing operation, whether it's root pests, leafy pests, anything?
Right. Yeah, definitely. Pests they can make or break your garden. It doesn't matter how good you do things. If you get infested, it's over. So that's very important. So, one thing is, yes, that immediately hydroponics, you just have fewer pests because you don't have medium, you don't have soil, you don't have cocoa, you don't have all these things that literally bring the bugs in. So right there, when you're using Hydroton or you're using rock wool, you just don't have any pests. The second thing to do is really, I got complacent in growing. I grow with no medium. I grow with Hydroton, and I grow with rock wool, and I got complacent in just not spraying because I just didn't have bugs. I'm sure to have those little yellow sticky tapes, to have one near every plant because that's important. I'm sure to keep my grow clean, which is cleaning the floor, not having dead leaves. I mean, that's good garden practice. A good garden practice means you don't leave stuff decaying around for bugs to come looking for. But then, if you look on IG and you see how a lot of people grow in industry, and people say, wow, those are just really tall plants. I don't know why they do that. In part, it's because you're getting away from cocoa and you're getting away from the soil, and certain pests only go so high. So that's one way to do it, is to make sure, you strip. You have a grow practice that allows you to get a canopy that's above your base, so you can strip all those leaves, and then you can actually effectively control that area. If it's just a Christmas tree right down to the ground, that's party time for bugs, right? It's you don't know they're there. So that's a couple things, and then of course having a good, whether you have pests or not. Many people realize once they, especially transition from like a rec to a medical grow, and then they start growing more than a few plants, that bugs are just part of life. So you just have to treat them, and it's preventative maintenance. And there's some really nice products these days that you don't have to put a mask on or a suit. It's just nice smelling stuff that's harmless to us. And you spray your plants and in the dark, and you wash them down, and you do it twice a week, and it works fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me just bring that back because I banged the microphone. Sorry. Let's go. Okay. Right. Thank you so much for that. And now moving on to beginner's guide, if we can call it that. There are several types of hydroponics, as you said, deep water culture, ebb and flow, nutrient film technique. There are just so many out there. Can you tell us how we can figure out which one works better for us? If you have any pro and cons that we can draw before we begin.
Yes, just go straight to deep water culture. That's what's going to work best for all of us.
Okay.
What it does, it takes away the vulnerable periods. Right.
Yes.
So hydroponics is powerful because it allows us to control everything that's happening, and regardless of which style you choose.
Yes.
Applies to all of them because we're controlling the input, we're controlling the fluid that runs past, and we're controlling the environment of the plant and the root. I mean, we have full control of it. Nothing's buried away that we don't know. But what makes it the best growing style is that there's that buffer.
Yeah.
So not only does it always have what it needs, like I said, the growing why it's so vigorous, but if you were waiting, roots can only dry out for so long and be exposed for so long. I saw in Disney World, it was amazing to go through the one of their displays and see the hydroponics. There's a hydroponics display there that is just absolutely amazing. I didn't even know. And just the point of it is that there was these plants that would come through a misting zone and their roots were just suspended. And imagine just like a sushi train with the tops on the top and the roots on the bottom. And that's all they did is they went round, and when they would come through, they would go through the mist zone. And that was one of the times when I really got onto no medium growing, but here's the point though, is in deep water culture, they are always in there. They're always in the solution. So they're not waiting for anything. So if we're in a 5-gallon bucket and we have 10 liters, we have 10 liters of water in there, 15 liters of water in there, it's good for days.
Yeah.
It's good for days and days and days. And it has everything it needs, especially if we know how to balance that solution nicely. And it's not very hard. It's very easy. So if it has everything it needs, there's no risk of it drying out. There's no risk of an emitter plugging.
Yeah.
Right? There's no risk of a pressurized pump breaking or a line and flooding your house and then your plant doesn't get wet. There's no risk of a timer not going off.
Yeah.
Right? To water your plants. All that's gone. So all that exists with other feeding techniques, which again are very powerful and work well. But deep water culture, once you get dialed in, you can do your feed on Monday, and then all you're really doing is monitoring it for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And on Wednesday to Thursday, that's the point where it's going to need a top up of water. So you got 2 to 3 days where you don't do anything. At maximum, you may check the solution pH. That's the only thing that you're going to be concerned about. And temperature, you got to monitor it all, but you're just going to check it, and that's it. And hopefully you're taking notes and you know how to dial your solution in, and it's within range. And then you spend your time on your plants, you spend the time on your kids, you spend the time on your family or yourself. So that's why I really, really love deep water culture. It allows you to spend less time in maintenance. Yeah. Right. When I look at my garden and I'm going into my garden and it's maintenance time, and whether that would be hand watering a pile of stuff or cleaning a bunch of stuff or whatever it is non-plant related, it's maintenance. And that doesn't really get me super excited.
Yeah.
When I have to go do something. But when I'm going in there and I'm saying, today we get to defoliate. Today we get to super crop. Today we get to put the scrog on. Today we get to harvest. That's the stuff I get really excited about. That's what, anytime I'm working with a plant, that's what I love. So deep water culture allows you to spend more time on your plants in a comfortable way and less time on the maintenance that's associated with it, while giving your plants everything you need and taking the grower out of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you are talking about maintenance and what gets you really excited about like plants. Can you describe to us, how do you train your plants to make them bigger, better, to avoid, as you said, pests going too close to the roots? What are your favorite techniques?
Oh yes, I grow everything the same. I came upon this grow style, and it was just something that naturally happened until I met my good friend. And then wouldn't you know that he had the same grow style, and then we've been perfecting it since. And it's very common style, which is done in certain craft grows. And it's all based around the principle of, if we're going to buy a tent, if we're going to buy a light, and we're going to spend all that money on resources, which is water and power and our personal energy that's going into and seeds and good genetics, we want a good result. And when we're talking about power, we're talking about 300 watts. If those 300 watts are not hitting the canopy and going directly into the plant, if you're just putting watts into the floor, that's not really a very effective way of growing.
Yeah.
So I really see only growing in one way for me, and I scrog everything. And that's the screen of green. And it all starts the same. I will have a clone, or I'll have a seed, and I will do a mainline split. So I'll wait until I get to the third, fourth, fifth node, depending on how the plant looks in the genetics. And then I will just as the bud's coming out, while you still have a symmetrical nodes coming out symmetrical on the branching, I will do a topping, and just on the tiniest, smallest spot. And that allows the two new nodes, the two new tops to come out, and we call it a mainline split. Yeah. When those come out, I will tape the little Velcro tape, or however you do it. I will tape those to the two big fan leaves that are essentially right there, and then that holds them down while they develop, allowing the rest of the bottom nodes to catch up.
Yes.
Once they catch up to the top, then I will go around. At that point, I will have already defoliated the larger initial fan leaves that have happened because they're already too big. Yeah. I'll get rid of them, and then I will go around and I will super crop all the tips. Yeah. Again, depending on plants and everything. So the super cropping of the tips now, and again, this is only a plant that's about a foot by a foot, right? Maybe a basketball or so, a little bit bigger. I'll super crop the tips, diverting all that energy, or pausing that energy from tip growth to those inner nodes.
Yeah.
Right. So that helps develop those inner nodes. And this is where I start talking about the power of deep water culture. Because we can give it everything it needs, and because it always has access, it's always it's always energized. And so it never has a limp period. So when you super crop, or you do Cushman chiropractics and stuff like that, you can make your limp plant completely limp one day, and the next day it's completely bounced back. It looks like it never happened. So a lot of stress techniques are not available with all grow styles to be able to just bounce back immediately like that. So so that's what I do. And then at that point, essentially is once I super crop my tips, and within a couple days, everything is looking big and vigorous, and I have a multi-top plant. And then I will take that plant, which will be about a foot or so. I don't like them to be too big. I don't like growing massive plants because they just they get out of hand, right? You can't do it. It's a mess. So I'll have that plant that's about a foot or so, and then I'll put that into my tent. I always grow in tents. That allows me to get a screen on, right? To get a trellis, and then I call it on approach. So then I'm on approach with my plants in my tent pre-flower. That allows me to flip and start bringing up all those inner nodes, outer nodes. All these tips are now up and available at the top of the scrog, and I start bringing them down and creating a flat canopy. And at this point, this is where now we're into flipping into flower, when all the light that's coming down in the tent has nowhere to go except for into the canopy.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. And I hope the listeners have their notes ready, because that was absolutely golden. And I will get back myself and take notes of all of this. Right. Now, to help a little bit our beginners, can you give us a budget, if you can remember when you first started? Maybe not just deep horticulture, just in general, so they can compare it to soil growth. What is the budget? What are we looking at?
Yeah, so your budget, you can get into deep water culture. So deep water culture has been restrictive in the past because it either puts you down a road of DIY or the road of a recirculating system, which work well, but are a little cost prohibitive for most people. So we can now get into deep water culture for, I would say, under $100. Right now, with the product that we've created, we think you're going to be able to just go and not get a DIY job that doesn't really function. Go get a hydro bucket, and the hydro bucket, net pot, some medium, a small air pump with air stone, and a airline. So that is going to cost you under $100. Okay, and so you're going to have everything you need to start growing, and then beyond that, of course, you need your standard stuff. You need your pH control, but that goes with any grow. You're going to need your pH in parts per million meters. I feel like that goes with every grow. You're going to need, what else? I mean, I think that's it. Your nutrients. Right, you already have nutrients, so that's it. There's not that much difference. But then once you get into it, you're kind of done purchasing stuff, and people don't realize that the cost of soil is appealing because it's a very cheap initial in. Yeah. But it never ends. Neither do nutrients. But once you purchase your grow equipment, they last a long time if you take care of your stuff. It's plastic medium, like Hydroton. It's why it's so popular, is because it's washable. So you can purchase these plastic parts and an air pump and an airline, and take care of your stuff, and that $100 investment will last you grow after grow after grow after grow. But please follow along on IG and grow with me, because how I grow, I could throw my tent out, my light out. I could throw it all out and buy it all again if I was to just sell what I grow. I mean, we pull down sick harvests it makes my head spin how much we pull down off of, if you, as a new grower, you want to be looking at to make it worth it, a gram per watt, right? So if you get a 150 watt light, you want to be able to grow, your goal should be growing 300 grams. And this goes back to the growing style of what I was describing. You don't want to grow one cola and a bunch of larf. That's not useful for a home grower. You want a bunch of colas. You want it to be all quads, all top quality, and that's the point of scrogging. That's the point of doing all this. So that $100 investment is really what you're looking for to get into the deep water culture experience.
Cool. Thank you so much, Mitch. Next, what do we need in order to maintain an optimal growing environment?
The optimal growing environment consists of two areas. Yeah. Often overlooked with big soil bags and big soil beds, of course, because they're insulated and they kind of do their thing, but still relevant and always important. You have to control your temperature, your parts per million, and your ppH. That's your root control zone. and then you also have to control your environmental control, and that's going to be exhaust fans and timers, some timers, and some thermal timers. Yeah. Right. I mean, those things are extremely valuable. When you're talking about all this stuff, I love it. I love planning grows and doing all these things. Everything creates heat. Everything we do. So as a home grower, we have so much freedom compared to commercial growers. Commercial growers, there's so much. You really have your hands tied on what you can and can't do and all the regulations. But as a home grower, for example, in the summer in Canada here where I live, we have 2 to 3 months that are extremely hot. So everything is out of the tent, including the air pumps, because the air pumps, I have fairly large air pumps. I have quite a few plants growing. They generate heat. So I have that outside of the tents because that would push the tent temperature too high, and then the AC is running too much. But now in the winter, or now that are already in the fall, it's cool enough that I've moved my air pumps inside my tents, and I'm taking control. I'm taking advantage of all that passive heat, because without it, I would have to add a heater. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but I mean, I guess it's just taking advantage of paying attention of your environment. Everything makes heat, and that's the number one thing is your heat and your humidity and your light intensity. It's never been easier to grow, right? There's so many people who share, and there's so much knowledge out there of the numbers and the specific ranges of everything. So it's really about just making sure your humidity and temperature's in range, and making sure your temperature and parts per million and pH are in range in the bottom. And I mean, cannabis knows what to do. It really does. All plants do, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And can you tell us a little bit about the differences between active and passive hydroponics?
Active and passive hydroponics. I'm not sure I could really speak to that terminology. I don't know what active or passive. What could you explain the? I don't really.
We can skip that. Yeah, we can. I know that. Sorry, this is out of the podcast. Yeah. We can cut this after. We always talk about active and passive as the way that the feeding solution goes into. I'm not too an expert. I'm more of a soil person, but I know that that's what they intend. But Carla did point this one as skip if you want to, so we can just skip it and I can go straight to the next one. Okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. Right. Perfect. So that was about the optimal growing environment. So can you tell us, maybe you have preferences, like your own personal one? Are there any type of strains that work better in an indoor hydroponic system?
Definitely. I couldn't speak to specific strains, but I do know, your indicas and certain hybrids that take on that shorter, smaller shape. Are more ideal for indoor grows. We're limited by height, and we're limited by light, and we're limited by heat, and all these things. So you have to remember that your plant, whatever you choose, is going to double to triple in size.
Yeah.
So if it's a foot tall and it gets 3 feet tall, how big is your tent and how far is it to your light, right? So you have to stay away from big sativas and stuff that, unless you have some real super technique and you know how to manage something like that. It's really about technique, more so. I'll stay away from long flowering big sativas for indoors, but if you have a good technique and you can control that growth, you can work with it. You can scrog any plant. It doesn't matter what strain it is. And you can take one plant and you can turn it into put it in a 4x4. I mean, we see that common scrog practice where one plant per tent. And in Canada, in places where you have only a 4 plant limit, well, you could have 4x4 tents and you could crush it, right? So, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And lastly, before we move on to audience question, which we do have those as well, do you have any experience with auto-flowering plants and hydroponics?
I have some. Yes, I'm practicing now with autoflower and hydroponics.
Can you tell us just a little bit about it?
Yes. So for anyone who's unfamiliar or, the difference between the autoflower and photoperiod, right? Photoperiod I love growing because I have full control. It doesn't matter if I screw them up. I always can just veg it longer. I'm never left. And if I really screw it up, I can just take a clone it back, start all over again. So I really like that. Autoflowers I really love because they help people just grow. They allow people who don't have all the availability of cloning this and that and blah, blah, blah. It's just like a tomato, right? You just take your seed, you plant it, you're going to get tomatoes. You're going to get cannabis. You don't have to do anything special except give it a light in the environment. So I have been playing with autoflowers for this reason because I just see that they're so wonderful. And some of the breeders have done such a good the level of not making them what people think autoflowers are. I mean, autoflowers are really surprising these days where you can fool people. They go, wow, I totally thought that was a photoperiod. So my experience with autoflowers in deep water culture, yes. Initially, I started growing, I've only had a few grows with autoflowers, and it's hard for me to not just do what I do. I'm in there, I do techniques, I'm just very active with my plants. And what I found, just a few things I could share with autoflowers, is when I started growing them similar to how I was doing my photoperiod plants, I was inducing flower too quickly because I was manipulating the roots.
Yeah.
And this is pretty cool. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen because of that. I don't want to trail on too much, but some new things happen all of a sudden when you have access to the top and the bottom of the plant, where with soil you just don't. And then, so what I was finding was when my first couple grows of autoflowers, they were too small because I was stressing them through different manipulation stresses. And I was triggering them into flower. Yeah. And then that goes against what everybody wants, from what I understand. What everybody prefers with autoflowers is that you let them veg, and especially in deep water culture, they have such a long veg period that when they actually do get to flower, they're just beast mode. And this is where you see these autoflowers that are absolutely massive. Yeah. And it's because deep water culture allows you to veg them for so long before they, 30% faster. If you have 30% more growth, you're going to have 30% bigger flower, right? You just got to put 30% larger plant, right? So, so then now I'm on that side of it where I was able to get some autoflowers at a nice size, and I thought I did not want them to get any larger because I don't like massive plants. So instead of root pruning or root manipulation to try induce flower, I did a full plant super crop, which is essentially, I flattened like pancakes every single thing. It was completely limp. It looked like it was dead after. And that actually induced flower. I mean, within 2 days. So some cool stuff. Again, I love sharing my photoperiod stuff because I know what I'm doing. My autoflower stuff, it's I'm always in there and I'm learning, but I learn quick, and I'm growing them right now in my garden. So yes, I do have some experience with them, and they're really awesome, cool. for new growers. New growers, very, very highly recommended.
Absolutely, thank you so much. Right, so with every podcast, we publish a couple of days before to ask our audience if they would like to ask any questions. And as always, we receive a a bunch of them, very, very, very requested topic. So for you, we selected a couple. And the first one is how to manage reservoir temp without a water cooler.
Yes. So this is one of the things that, one of the reasons why deepwater culture has had a trouble catching on is you have to essentially, we're led to believe that if you want to grow in deepwater culture, you have to have a recirculating system to control your water temperature, so you can have an external so you would have your 4 plants in your tent. You'd have your external reservoir, another tote, which is plumbed into those ones, and then that allows you to manage your reservoir solution. But you have pumps moving all that fluid around through tubes and coming and going, and by volume you're using more, and so you have to use a water chiller. It's unavoidable. When I was in my experience of going through recirculating, before I created the hydro bucket and had it in my garden, it was very challenging. I had a very, very hard time keeping my water temperatures under control. And with that large amount of volume, reservoir changes aren't that functional. You end up wasting quite a bit of water to do that. So what I found was, once I created the hydro bucket and I got the hydro bucket back in my garden, I thought, instead of hooking up a recirculating system, I'll just put another tent beside it, right? And because the reason for having access to the inside of a 5-gallon bucket, like the hydro bucket gives, is so it's essentially you have a reservoir on the side.
Yes.
So the reservoir allows us to not lift the top and allows us to have access, but now we don't need to have all that heat and power associated with that function, right? So this is where I'm going with it, is this is how we manage temperature now. Before, there was no way around it. But with the hydro bucket and having that purposely designed access, I show people how to grow in their garden without using a chiller, because we get to start and maintain our fluid that's changing every 4 days. So I have a chiller and I have a heater. I use my chiller for 3 months a year, and I use my heater for the rest of the year, right? Because that's just, I'm bringing the water to the optimum temperature regardless. So sometimes it's colder, sometimes it's hotter, but it's usually colder in my environment. So I mix 100 liters at a time in a great big garbage can, is how I mix, in a plastic garbage tote. And so I mix my 100 liters and I bring it to temperature. So whether that's cooling or heating, that's what I do first. And then once it's to temperature, then I just go and I fill my hydro buckets, right? They're scrogged, they're ready to go, I fill them. I wrap each one in insulation. So whether that is, you could use a blanket. I use the thermal bubble wrap that you put on furnaces that are available at all the hardware stores. Right? So this is how we get away from the chiller, is that we take our cold water, we mix our ideal solution, and let's call that at 68 degrees. Let's call it 66 degrees. I always mix at 66 degrees, my initial. I put it into the hydro buckets, and then over the next 4 days, over the next 2 to 4 days, 3 things are coming out of range: temperature, pH, and parts per million, right? They're all going to start getting away from where we want them, where we want them, but they're still in range. At the end of day 3 or at the beginning of day 4, when the volume has gone down in the bucket and the temperature's gone up, we now have access where we just fill it up with cold water again. Right? It's just very, very simple. And then when we do that maintenance on day 4, we fill it up with, we adjust 3 things. We adjust the pH, we adjust the temperature of that solution, and we adjust the parts per million, right? Yes. So because it's concentrating and we dilute it. This gets into a growing practice that I share on how I grow. But this is how we get away from it, is that we're in there and we have the ability to adjust those parameters twice a week.
Yeah.
And then so we really don't need a chiller if you have access to cold water. If you have access to a water chiller and you're growing one plant, you could just chill one thing of water, and you know that in 4 days you just use that nice cold water for your one plant. I mean, you're going to crush, you'll be able to grow 4 really nice ounces out of one plant.
Yeah.
With just one fridge and some cold water. I mean, it's not out of reach for a lot of people, right? And so then every 4 days when we're doing that, we have the opportunity to change or to bring everything into range. And then in the next 4 days, once a week, I always, once the fluid level goes down again, I remove all that. You have a small suction pump, pony pump. I mean, this is one of the items I forgot to mention earlier. A small pump, which is ideal. I mean, let the pump do the work. That's what I say. I don't lift bags of dirt. I don't do anything. I watch the pump go, and then I go, okay, great, and I do it again. It's fantastic for so many people, right? We have sore backs and stuff, and life hurts. So that's it. I mean, at the end of the 8 days, right? I feed on Monday. On day 4, the fluid's down, the pH is up, the concentration's up, and the temperature's up. I give it cold water at the proper pH. That puts everything in range for another 4 days. So then the next 4 days, it's going down, and at that 4 days, I empty it, and there's really only maybe a couple inches left at the bottom.
Yeah.
And then I fill it up with nice cold water only that's pH'd with some root enzyme. So this allows the plant, whichever stress, and this goes to, I mean, the why it works so well for new growers, is at the end of the week, regardless as if we screwed it up, right? If we screwed it up or we weren't home in the first 4 days, we get to fix it on day 4. And then we got another 4 days. If we screwed it up, we really get to fix it, because what do we say? What is advice when we get into a plant problem? We say flush it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we flush it every week. So there's a couple things that this does. Is one, it gets rid of everything that we've done that week, whether we pushed it hard or not enough or whatever. It puts it in a nice, bubbly, highly oxygenated enzyme solution, right, of the perfect temperature. And it's in there, and it's nice and cold, only for 24 hours. So it's bringing everything ideal. The pH is perfect for 24 hours, and it's only water and enzymes. The enzymes are going to go in there and clean out your roots and make sure there's no organics that are going to be maybe little leaves or broken off roots or stuff.
Yeah.
They're going to eat that. And then we start off on Monday again.
Yeah.
So we start off with a new solution, giving it exactly what it needs. And it's gone from a water solution, so the plant's actually fairly hungry because we've been flushing it for 24 hours, and it starts that week again, and it's very hungry, so it really accepts what you do. And you can dial this in so you literally do not even have to open the hood and look under the hood. You're only there to do it every 4 days, and that's it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mitch. That was very, very helpful. And lastly, which you did go over this a little bit, so maybe we can just shoot some names and techniques, is what are the best growing techniques for hydroponic growth? If you can just give us a rundown of the one that you prefer to use.
Yeah, the best techniques for hydroponic growth, mainline split, super cropping, Cushman chiropractics, low stress training, high stress training, scrog. That would be it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be everything that I do. Yeah.
Lovely. Cool. Well, that brings us to the end of this interview. We thank you so much, Mitchell. This has been incredibly helpful, and hopefully a lot of our new hydroponics growers will tune in and be able to start their beautiful new crops. Thank you so much, Mitchell, for joining today.
Thank you so much. It's always my pleasure to come and have the opportunity to just share what I do in my garden. I love it so much. I spend so much time on it, and it's led me to this place, and the opportunity to come and share with you is just, it's fantastic. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, Mitchell.
Bye.